If you look at it globally, about 70% of the planet's covered in water, but the reality is only about 2.5% of that is actually fresh water, the rest being in the oceans or saline water. And of that, actually, only about 1% of that water is actually accessible. A lot of that fresh water is locked up in ice caps or glaciers. So actually, the volume of water that, if you like, the 7 billion people on the planet kind of use is actually relatively small. And that's no different in a way into the UK. So although obviously it does rain quite often, we think in the UK we're supporting a very large population. So the actual amount of rainfall per person is often quoted as being less than some Middle East countries.
I think running an allotment project, you become very aware of when it's raining and when it's not raining. And for example, last summer so that's 2018, there was really quite a prolonged period without rain. And I think lots of people noticed that because it was quite hot. But also last winter, I write a chalk to-do list on the ground, and there were 7 weeks maybe when I returned, not consecutive weeks, but 7 times I returned and my list was still completely intact. So I think we have long periods without water that we don't notice. And you notice them if you're trying to grow things, which we are here.
There is quite a strong sense in the UK of water as a right, and that traditionally that we turn on the taps and we expect water to be there. If you speak to people in the UK from different cultures, and we have done within the Dry project, then actually you find that people's water expectations, people's water values can be quite different in terms of what their expectations might be. In the UK, we wash our dishes and flush the toilets and wash our cars and water our gardens with the same quality of water. And there, we don't stop and think about the logic of that. And whether that is actually a sustainable model into the future, whether it's a sustainable model when there's periods of scarcity, for example.
I think it's really easy because we live in places where you turn on a tap and running water comes out. It's really easy to forget that water is not infinite and free. It's a valuable resource. It takes energy to pump it to wherever you're receiving it. It takes a huge amount of energy to collect it and purify it and all of those things. So I think we don't even really see water as part of our carbon footprint, but it is part of our carbon footprint. And I think if you're gardening, then you're just put in touch with that fact in a different way, because if it doesn't rain, this will die. If all this dies, I don't have a project left.
But water itself is actually quite cheap. Typically across the country, it's around about £1 a day, just over £1 a day, and that's for both the drinking water that you get out of your tap, but also taking the wastewater away and making sure that that's all treated and the water put back into the environment safely. So actually, it's very, very cheap on a sort of daily basis when you think about what we're getting as a service. That is, if you look at it compared to other aspects, it's actually considerably cheaper than some of the other things that we perhaps take for granted day to day, be it electricity or gas.
Lots of the women I work with have been brought up in places where you actually have to physically carry every drop of water that you're going to use. I think you just see the value of it very, very differently on an allotment. You're not allowed to use hoses. We've got a trough. Everything, you carry it all. So you have a very different idea of how much you're using. When you can just turn on a tap, you just don't notice it in the same way.
In the Dry project, we focused in on allotment holders as one particular water sensitive group who were very keen to work with us. Because they were already thinking about these sort of issues themselves, because some of them are not on mains water. Some are aware that the mains water might be costly, and so they're looking at, as a group, they are looking at ways in which you grow crops and you manage water on the allotment in sustainable ways.
One of the important things is about the quality of your soil. We use a no-dig approach here, which means that we don't turn the soil over. If you turn your soil over, you kill the worms, you dry the soil out. So we use layers of newspaper to suppress weeds and then hops on top of that. which means if you scrape that away, you'll see lots of worm activity and the soil is really quite damp. And another thing we do is we plant perennials. So rather than doing lots of annual planting, so the plant puts down a really substantial, resilient root system.